where Jade O'Dowda has to try and throw in an easy year. Far from it. After the fine gold again, Holly Mills will take the quickest time in 800 metres. O'Dowda trying to get something over Cape Cod.
If you're afraid of failure, you don't deserve success. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Athlete Podcast sponsored by Sports for Champions. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Team GB Heptathlete Holly Mills. How are you today, Holly?
I'm fabulous, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in athletics?
Of course, I have been doing athletics for about 15 years now. I first got into it when I was 8 years old. A parent came up to my dad at sports day after I won a couple of the races and said, Holly's pretty quick, you should take her up to the local athletics track in Andover, which is back home in Hampshire where I lived. And he did a couple of weeks later, and I fell in love with the track immediately. I'd never really heard of athletics before that point, but my first couple of sessions I was like, yeah, this is a bit of me. I like this a lot. And then I've been doing it since.
Had you played any team sports in school before that?
Definitely. I remember doing tag rugby back in the day and all kinds of little bits of netball and stuff and some rounders and all kind of things that we did in PE, but I'd never really done anything outside of school. It had all been within school sports days and team things, which I enjoy. I always loved running around. I always had so much energy. But yeah, nothing had ever been to a competitive level for me at that point.
And did you come from a sporting family?
My dad used to do quite a bit of sports. He was a semi-professional footballer and he did a lot of cricket and stuff, so he liked the ball sports. My mum not so much, but they both are majorly into fitness. They love being active. They've completed a couple of marathons each and everything. So there's sporting background, never proper competitively, but we're a very active family in general.
I see. And do you remember that transition from going, presumably you were at the highest level in your school when you were taking part in sports days and things like that. Do you remember that first foray into an athletics club? How did it differ?
Yeah, I definitely was in primary school, I was the fastest girl in the school and stuff, and it was there was a point where I was beating some of the boys and everything, which was always really exciting. But yeah, taking that transition from competing at sports days and just within school to doing it for my local athletics club and going to competitions, I remember always just being so nervous. I was nervous at sports day, but then doing actual athletics competitions, even more nervous, where you actually have people watching you and you're competing for a certain team. I think I was more nervous back then than I am now competing at Commonwealth and all that kind of thing. Back in the day, definitely I felt the pressure then. How
do you think you've overcome that?
I think it's just because I've been doing it for such a long period of time, you get used to it. And because I competed at a high level from a young age, I was going from when I was 15, I was already travelling around the world competing. So you get used to that high level of pressure from the competition. So now it's I turn up and I'm this is more exciting than it is nerve-wracking kind of thing, just from doing it for so long.
Makes sense. And then do you remember when you sort of first realised that this is something that you wanted to do professionally?
Yeah, I think it's the first time I got my first England vest or something when I was 15, 16, I was just oh, you're actually not bad at this. This is something that you could actually do for a living. And then I think it comes from watching the 2012 Olympics. That definitely, I saw people doing that and I was this is something that people do for their jobs. At the moment I was just doing that for just pure enjoyment, and I was wow, people can actually do that full time. That would be incredible to be able to do that. So it was around the ages from 12 to 16, I think I went on the journey of being I can do this for fun and as a career, and then it developed on from there.
Is there a moment where you have to choose? So for example, do you finish your GCSEs, you're looking at your options and you think, right, well, either I can hedge my bets or I can just put all my eggs in this basket and hope that it works out kind of thing?
Yeah, and I think I did do the put all my eggs in that basket, because I'm the type of person that almost doesn't not believe in a plan B, but I'm always if you have a backup plan, there's part of your brain that thinks that plan A will fail. So I've definitely been the type of person where I will go full-heartedly into one thing. And I think it was around that kind of getting towards the end of secondary school kind of time where I was like, this is something that I see myself doing for the foreseeable future. So I really did like start making sacrifices at that point to project myself in that kind of direction.
What do you think it is about you as a young person that kind of gave you the impetus to do that? I think most people would be, most people do hedge the bets, don't they? And they plan for several eventualities. What do you think it is about you that just total tunnel vision went for it?
I think it's just one of my personality traits is that I tend to go all in with everything. If I fully believe something, I will fully commit to it, and I will bring a level of discipline that I like don't bring to stuff that I'm half-hearted about. Like I will fully go into it, and I think I saw in sport like there was the passion that was there was the love for it, and then obviously I knew that I was pretty good at it as well. So I had kind of those three things like driving me forwards towards that, and so that kind of overtook all of the socialising and the parties that were going on around that time when you're kind of like in your teens. And I was like, I could almost see that vision of me kind of at the Olympics, at the World Championships at that point, and I was like, that vision brings me a lot more happiness than kind of all of the side socialising that was going on at the time. So for me, that kind of decision to have that level of discipline wasn't a difficult one.
Yeah, almost made for you.
Yes.
Makes sense. And then when did you first get involved with Team GB? Are you already competing in heptathlon around this time?
So at this time, I'm still just solely a long jumper. I got my first GB vest in 2016 when I went to the European Youth Championships in Tbilisi for the long jump, where I did end up winning the gold medal. Well, I think I went into the competition ranked about 5th or 6th, and I came out with the gold, and that was my first kind of major medal, and that kind of put me on the trajectory that I had through the junior years. But yeah, I've kind of been on that kind of Team GB pathway ever since I was 16. Been involved in British athletics, been to all like the junior and youth kind of competitions around the GB level, and then progressed then to the senior GB teams straight from there. So I've had quite a big run in kind of from when I was 16 to now I'm 23 of all those years kind of competing at that level.
Makes sense. And when did heptathlon first come about?
Heptathlon first came about when I was 18 years old. So I'd done a couple of years on the international stage as a long jumper, and then I went to Brunel University when I was 18 and decided that I almost needed a new level of challenge, because although I was still very, very passionate about long jump, I'd had like a bit of a rough year in 2018 with regards to my performances were kind of plateauing from where I'd had such an acceleration of success so young. And I was like, I feel like I need something almost to reignite that kind of fire for athletics. And I thought, what better way to kind of challenge yourself than to add 6 other events into the mix, and kind of, I'm always looking to kind of learn new things, learn new skills. And I was like, heptathlon's kind of a all-round athletic ability kind of thing to learn. So when I was 18, I was like, right, let's give 7 events a go.
I think athletes dedicate themselves entirely to their event, but to add 6 completely new events, especially having trained already for so long in long jump, what was the steepest learning curve?
It was definitely becoming competent with the motor skills in things like the throws. Like the first couple of years, I definitely struggled with that the most, because I think coming from a long jump background, you have that speed and power for the jumps and the sprints. But the throws came, and they still do, they're very unnatural to me. From where, even when I was younger, I didn't do a lot of throwing competitions. I never really developed those motor skills early on, so that's definitely taken the longest to kind of come through. And the same with the 800, like I've never been a distance type of runner. I've always loved like the short, fast, powerful stuff. So to actually do the 800, the first year I did it, I was awful at it, and me and my coach have worked ridiculously hard over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, whereas now the 800 is possibly one of my strongest events.
Wow.
Yeah, it took a long time to kind of turn me into a proper like powerhouse of an athlete, to kind of spread in me, so I still have that power, but I also am developing that aerobic capacity. So yeah, it's kind of, you have to have a foot in all buckets in heptathlon, so it's been developing that has been quite difficult, but we're getting there. We're getting to the point where I'm competent at most things now.
Just in case anyone at home's unaware, can you just break down the event in the order it normally takes place?
Yeah, so the heptathlon takes place over 2 days, and on the first day you do 4 events, and on the second day you do 3 events. So on the first day you'll compete in the 100 metre hurdles, the high jump, the shot put, and the 200 metres. And then you'll go home, sleep, come back the next morning, very, very tired and very, very sore.
Of course.
And then you'll compete in the long jump, the javelin, and then you'll finish it off with the 800 metres at the end of it. So it's a very intense 2 days of competition, 7 events, and then you obviously get a points total of your accumulation of all of your scores over the 2 days, which gives you your heptathlon performance.
I see. And then how do the points totals work?
So per event, depending on how fast you run, how far you jump, how far you throw, you'll get a set number of points, and this is the same across all heptathlons you do across all countries in the world. There's the exact same points allocated for certain distances. So for example, like if you run 13.2 seconds for the hurdles, that's like 1,050 points, whereas like for a 14 metre shot put throw, that might be like 800 points. So the points totals differ event to event depending on how well you do, which is where it kind of makes the competition very exciting, because people who have better events in certain things can gain points on you in those, and then they might drop off if they have a weaker event. And so it makes like the lead change throughout the whole weekend of competition. But yeah, you get points allocated depending on how well you do in each discipline, and then they all add up together over the 7 events to give you your grand total, and it's whoever's got the highest points over the whole 7 events will win the competition.
That's amazing. It must create the psychological aspects to the games in terms of you're looking at how other people are doing, you're trying to predict what people are going to do in the second day events. Is that something that you watch, or do you just try and focus on your bit and your event?
I mean, I'd like to say that I focus primarily on myself, but obviously when you're so submerged in that competition, it is difficult to not look at what people are doing. And there have been times where it's like you're in the competition and you're kind of working out the maths in your head, and it's like, oh, if they've jumped 20 centimetres further than me, they've gained 60 points on me, so I have to then in this next event throw 50 centimetres further to try and gain that lead back and everything. So there is a lot of like changing up of the leaders and everything, and you're trying to do the maths on where you can gain and where they might lose points on you. So yeah, there is that whole psychological aspect as well, but you do try the best you can just to be like, I can't affect what anyone else does in this competition. All I can do is literally focus on nailing what I can do, and then they'll either falter or succeed depending on, but yeah, you just try and focus on yourself, but there is definitely you are looking at what other people are doing at the same time.
I imagine it'd be impossible not to.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the biggest stepping stones for a lot of our athletes is the Youth Olympics. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say it is a crucial point. It definitely prepares you for the future. Like, I've done a lot of like junior competitions, and I can definitely say that they have helped me significantly in competing at a senior level. I think I was able to bridge that gap between being a junior and being a senior so much easier because I'd had that level of global exposure so young. So things like the Youth Olympics really do definitely help, like, you get better when you actually become a senior, because it's a big step. So if you haven't done anything like that at a youth level, you'll definitely get to senior and you're like, oh wow, okay, this is a different ball game. But yeah, it definitely helps to kind of minimise that big jump that you have to make.
Definitely. And forgive me if the date is wrong, but I believe it was in 2021 you set a record at the British Champs, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
That was, yes, in the pentathlon. And that was a championship record at the time. And that was what qualified me for my first senior championships, which was the European Championships in Turin in 2021, where I ended up finishing 5th, I think, which was a lot higher than I had anticipated placing. But yeah, that was a big step up for me, because I think that was one of my first pentathlons that I'd done since changing to being a multi-eventer. So in the past I dabbled a little bit in doing pentathlons when I was younger, and I think my PB before that was like just over 4,000 points, and then I came out in 2021 and set the British champs record for the pentathlon at about 4,500 points. So it was a massive jump up for me, and I really like nailed all of my events in that competition to actually set that record. So that was quite a momentous occasion for me, especially because it then achieved me my first senior GB vest off the back of that performance.
Definitely. The reason I ask about it is there's almost a spring of articles that come out about you at that time, and it was almost you announcing yourself on the international stage in that event.
Absolutely.
Did that come with any pressure?
I think so. I think because a lot of people questioned my choice to change from a long jumper to a multi-eventer. And I think that was kind of the solidifying competition where people were like, oh, actually she might be able to be quite successful as a multi-eventer like she was as a long jumper at that kind of youth level. So that was, kind of me announcing myself, I actually am here to stay as a multi-eventer, because at that time as well, people were kind of questioning whether it was just kind of she's taken a couple years to kind of like dabble around in the multi-events, maybe strengthen some of her physical attributes to help her down the line when she goes back to long jump. But actually that was me kind of saying, no, this is the path I'm taking. I am a multi-eventer now, and I've kind of almost proved that I'm worthy of being a multi-eventer on this international stage. So I think it confirmed what I already thought, but it also kind of made people turn and be like, oh, actually, yeah, she could be a multi-eventer at like kind of global champs kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad way to announce yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you've kind of had quite a linear, despite obviously changing events, but I think every time you've took to something, you've took to it really well, and you've proved that you've been able to do it. So you went on to compete then internationally. Can you tell us a little bit about the qualifying for Tokyo?
Yes, so obviously the Olympics were delayed till 2021 because of COVID, which in hindsight probably helped me a little bit because it gave me an extra year on top of, because by that point I'd only been doing heptathlon for 2 years, which for anyone to kind of even be close to qualifying for the Olympics after just doing the sport for 2 years is quite a short amount of time. So the extra year did help me, and it put me in a really good position to qualify. It was just, that was the first year that they decreased the field size. So up until 2021 Tokyo, the field size had been 32 athletes. And then for Tokyo, they decreased the field size to 24 athletes. And I managed to put myself in a really good position. But unfortunately, at the time of the selection for the Olympic Games, I was ranked 25th in the world. So obviously I was one place outside of the quota. I'd done everything I needed to do. I'd got the British Athletics B standard. I'd completed all the heptathlons that I'd needed to do that year. But unfortunately, where they only had a quota for 24 people and I fell 25th, that meant that I missed out on those Olympic Games by one place, which obviously at the time was devastating because most athletes' goal is to become an Olympian. And I genuinely thought that was the year that I was going to do it. At the time, obviously, I was only 21 years old, so I was still relatively young, but I still thought there are people that are younger that have been to the Olympics, like, I can do that, but everything, happens for a reason, and I'm sure, like, later down the line, I'll look back and be like, I just was not meant to go to that Olympics. But, yeah, it was definitely a tough thing to take, especially when you did everything that you could have, and then to miss out by one place, obviously, was, difficult to overcome.
And how do you overcome something like that? I think everybody deals with disappointments in life, and it's a huge part of life. But I find athletes interesting in that a lot of the time they take that disappointment and it spurs them on to the next stage of their career. Definitely,
and I think it just, at the time, it did obviously take a couple months of disappointment to kind of get over that. It's not like you miss out and then instantly you're like, right, what's next? It did take a little bit of time processing the fact that the Olympics obviously only comes around every 4 years, and I had missed out on it, and I was like, no, I have to wait. It was only an extra 3 years because of the delay, but it was like, wow, I actually have to wait 3 more years to actually try and become an Olympian again. And But after a couple months of disappointment, there was definitely like, right, okay, you have 3 years, you're going to be better prepared, you're going to have been a heptathlete for 6 years by that point, and you're going to go into this next Olympic cycle with so much more preparation behind you, and it put a lot more fire in the belly to kind of strive towards Paris 2024, which is obviously next year.
Fantastic. Sort of just one rung under the Olympics tends to be the international championships and the Commonwealth Games. Birmingham was lucky enough to host the last Commonwealth Games. Can you tell us a bit about your experience there?
The Birmingham Commonwealth Games was next level. Like, to be able to experience a home crowd is something that I am extremely grateful for, the fact that I got to experience that, because there are very few athletes that actually get that level of support. Like, I remember coming out, just the whole 2 days that I competed, the home crowd just absolutely just loved all of the British athletes. And it was a challenging competition for me. I went into it ranked as the favourite based on that season of how I'd competed against the other people who were in the competition. But unfortunately, picking up niggles in like my Achilles and my hamstring in the holding camp leading up to the Commonwealth Games meant that I did, in my terms, underperform at the Games and ended up coming away with 4th, which is obviously, some people would argue, the worst position to finish in, because you're just off the podium, like you've literally just missed out. So that was something that was very difficult to take. And it was something where the injuries just came at just the worst time, which meant I wasn't able to perform at my best. So missing a medal at the Commonwealth Games was, gutting for me, but at the same time, it was one of the best competitions I've ever competed in. Yeah,
an amazing experience, I'm sure. But also, you must take some solace from the fact that you were so close despite being injured. So it must give you a bit of confidence now that you think, right, well, if I can do that with an Achilles and a hamstring injury, what am I going to do fully fit?
Definitely, and it definitely gives me that reassurance that if I can come that close when I'm not at my peak, when I am at my peak, I feel like I could do quite a lot of damage in one of those competitions. So yeah, going forward, it definitely bodes well.
Yeah, we don't doubt you.
For sure.
And I know you're in rehab at the moment for a slight injury. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and what that entails?
Yes, so at the moment I am 12 weeks post rupturing my right hamstring. I had a couple of hamstring niggles over the last couple months, and then in the week before the trials for this year's World Championships in Budapest, I was going over a hurdle in training, and then I basically just popped my right hamstring. It was one of those things that's kind of, there were a couple of warning signs leading into it where we'd had a couple of hamstring tightness and a few niggles, but it's one of those ones where it literally just on the day my body said, no, we're not happy, we're not doing it, and I have a grade like 3 or 4C hamstring tendon injury, which we're currently rehabbing, which is a bit of a pain, obviously, to miss out on this year's World Championships in Budapest, which looked like an incredible champs, which I would have loved to have been a part of, and I kind of struggled to watch it on the TV and stuff because I was like, I should be there competing and challenging for those medals and everything. But it just makes my run into Paris that much more strong, I think, because I'm literally like, right, we're back on it now. We're going through the rehab and we're getting back ready, fit for Paris, which is in 11 months' time. So yeah, we're on the road to recovery, and it is going very well at the moment. So we're just keeping plugging away.
That's brilliant. And do you have any events in the lead up to Paris, or is it all just focused on that?
Hopefully I will be doing the World Indoor Championships in Glasgow, which I will decide around kind of December time if I'm back to full fitness after this hamstring injury, whether we're going to go for that, which I really hope that I am able to, because I think Glasgow, that's kind of like a home championships. Competing for Team GB, obviously up in Scotland, would be incredible, and hopefully I would be able to increase my 4th place that I finished at the last World Champs in 2022 to get on the podium in Glasgow in 2024, which would be a great achievement. And I love indoor competing, I love doing the pentathlon, so that would be the next kind of big global thing. Aside from that, I will be in Gotsis, which is the biggest multi-events competition in the world, and hopefully also the European Championships in Rome, which are next June. So actually, now that I'm saying that, next year
busy.
year is a big year. There are a lot of global competitions coming up. So yeah, it's going to be a big winter of training ready for a whole lot of fun next year.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I think there could be no better preparation than winning medals and performing at the international stage, and it does seem like you're sort of ready to break into that medal position, and it looks like Paris will come at the perfect time, hopefully after a good season next year.
Definitely. I've definitely had a lot of preparation just missing the podium. So I'm like, every year I'm getting closer and closer to kind of being on that podium, and I think next year could really be, there's so many opportunities, and I feel like with the right run in this winter and coming out next year, we really could see a big breakthrough for me. 2024 I think is definitely going to be my year for kind of breaking through onto that podium at a global level.
It definitely looks like it. Can you tell us a little bit about funding, how that works in your sport, and perhaps how Sports for Champions is going to help with that?
Absolutely. I mean, as with a lot of sports that I know of, unless you're up in like kind of like male footballers' wages, that's what a lot of people see when they see sports people. It's like, oh, they're earning like millions and millions, and for a lot of sports people that is not the case whatsoever. I'm very fortunate that I'm funded by British Athletics currently, but at the same time that isn't a solid thing. So if you underperform 1 year, you can very easily be taken off funding, and then obviously you're like, well, how the hell am I going to kind of pay for this to be my full-time job? So obviously Sports for Champions helps massively with that, because doing events in schools is going to allow me to kind of support me in my training. So it means that I don't have to go off and get like a small part-time job, because that massively takes away from the hours that I train, especially with the amount of events that I have to kind of train for. I'm training for 8 hours a day sometimes, and then you add recovery on top of that, and you add all of like the other little things that need to be done. If I had to then go and self-fund myself elsewhere, that would take a lot of time away from my recovery and everything, which would massively impact kind of how far I'm able to take this sport. So yeah, funding is a big thing in athletics, definitely.
It's so difficult for athletes who are expected obviously to train 40, 50 hours per week, including then if you think about the nutrition side of things. What does a typical day of training look like for you?
So I would usually start training at 9 a.m. On like say a Monday. I'd wake up at 7, kind of do all my morning preparation, good breakfast, get that all in, maybe do a little bit of morning reading, and then go from training 9 till probably 1. So that's 4 hours in the morning, and then I'd head back home, probably have like a 30-minute nap to recover from the morning, then have another big lunch, and then probably do a little bit of maybe admin work or reading, and then head back down to the track for about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'd probably train from about 4 till 8 p.m. And that will involve everything. Throughout the week we cover all of the events twice, so we'll do 1 big session per event and then 1 mini drill session per event. I'll gym or do a circuit every day, and then that's on top of all of the power-based stuff, the sprinting. Obviously you have to fit in like the cardio and aerobic stuff, because where I do something that involves so many different components, so much stuff has to be covered throughout the week. So I'm training 6 days a week and trying to fit in all of like strength, power, aerobic, cardio, technical. So there's a lot of components that kind of slot into each thing, which ends up with me training for about 8 hours a day, which is a lot, but if you love it, it's fun. So
well, I think that's brilliant advice and a great note to end things on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome, and thank you to everyone joining at home. We'll see you next time. Cheers.